Happy Friday, everybody. We're live with Rabble Rants. Y'all made it. It snowed today again in the middle of April here where I am, so we're just going to make the best of that shit. But my tulips are peeking through the ground just like about this much. How are you all doing?
We have no snow here, so I'm happy about that.
I'm checking right now, but yeah, so far so good. Knock on wood. I'm not too far away from you there.
Joe hasn't
We're
touched grass today, then, clearly.
I yeah, I haven't touched any grass. I see grass, I see snow right now at the front door, so I'm like, bit of A,
Well,
bit of B, but no actual snow falling. So we'll see how
we'll,
the day ends.
We'll maybe talk long enough that when you go outside, it'll warm up and the snow will be gone and we can get on with our spring and the spring election. That's just going to be one of the things that we're talking about this week as we unpack the headlines. We're going to start off with Trump. We're going to go kind of global and narrow it down to the local as we tend to do. We're going to talk about the tariffs a little bit, but more maybe what their motivation was. We don't know what's going on with them as much as you do, but we're going to unpack a little bit of it. Also, just generally the US descent into fascism. There's like a collection of stories coming from south of the border that, are just massive red flags, especially since our politicians don't differ all that much from ideology, right? So we keep an eye on what's happening there. Also, we will unpack the federal election and the issues that come up with it there. We won't be measuring rally sizes all so much. We're going to get into a little bit more of the meat and potatoes of the election. But also, an election just happened in Vancouver that's worth talking about. A socialist took a seat on Vancouver City Council. We'll talk about Sean Orr's victory and what that maybe means for electoral politics for socialists. And maybe we'll touch on the little bit of hoopla that's gone on after his victory. If folks have been watching, you'll know what we're talking about. And then that'll bring us to the second half of the show, which is updates from the grassroots. So victories from campaigns, legal rulings, calls to action as well. So make sure you stay tuned for that part of the show. But today, Joe is with me. My name is Jessa, and Ashley has joined us this week. Ashley's always a good component to have when we're talking about the Canadian federal election, especially since most people's opinions on Carney come from his biography. And there's never too much that we can learn about why to hate Pierre Poilievre, or Poilievre. We will not judge. We listen, but we don't judge. Right, Ashley?
Yeah. That's right.
Ashley, you talk about economics a lot, and folks are trying to figure out what the hell is going on with tariffs. And it used to be, how are we going to respond to tariffs? We've talked about that a lot. We've seen what our politicians are doing in response to it. But I think recently with the stock market crash, that was the topic last week, and then its triumphant return that, no doubt people are giving Trump credit for the greatest rise in market prices. But what the fuck is going on? Do you have an opinion on? Joe's I can see him. He's feverishly trying to pull up some evidence, some evidence for us that perhaps this is market manipulation for our wealthiest one percenters.
Yeah. I would say that this is a pump and dump. That this is like
there's a name for it, is there?
Yeah. It's okay. Yeah. So I would say that I don't. So Warren Buffett, who's an oligarch, has had the most amount of cash he's ever had on hand ever in the history of his career. He's been basically pulling out money out of the stock market for the last 5 years or so, essentially waiting for this. And what they intend on doing is they tank the stocks, and then the richest of the rich go in and they buy all the stocks. And then they continuously, because doesn't matter to them, right, whether or not it goes down or goes up, because they're the ones
who can wait it out.
Yeah, 100%. They have so much money, and they have all of our pension funds, right? All of our pension funds are tied up in the stock market, so they don't care. It's not their money, and that's essentially what they're doing. It's just market manipulation, and Donald Trump's been overt about it, talking about how this is like a correction or whatever. But they did the same thing during COVID. The COVID era with the stock market crash, that was essentially the largest wealth transfer in human history, transfer from the working class to the top 1%, and that was strategic, and that was designed by BlackRock. That whole policy, they had run games essentially in advance of the COVID-19 pandemic on how they would use such an incident, such a catastrophic incident to benefit the wealthiest people in the world. And they did that. So I just think we're seeing that again.
Joe, do you have that video by chance?
I have the video clip of them celebrating it. I believe this is maybe the clip here.
Yeah, so let's run it and then we'll respond.
It's not just a company, it's actually an individual. And he made $2.5 billion today, and he made $900 million. That's not bad, because he's in financials. I've always been fine.
So, aside from the fact that straight out there, these guys are talking about how well they've succeeded in using the market to their exact benefit. The market manipulation is actually kind of interesting to, like, aside from the fact that you're just absolutely playing the market for your advantage. And for those who don't know, you can make money on the market going down, and you can make money on the market going up in both directions. On the market going up, it's easy and straightforward. Everybody knows it. Buy low, sell high kind of thing. On the market going down, you can still make money. It's called short selling. And this is where you go out, you borrow stocks from a company at the high price, sell them, and then wait till the end of the day when the stocks are lower in price because the market's going down, buy them back and at a lower cost than what you sold them for, and give them back to the original company. And there's a lot of money to be made that way. This is what the entire GameStop incident was all about in regards to people kept on keeping that price high, tried to mess with these guys. So
that's why. Oh, sorry.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
So I caution people when they get really excited. They're going, "Oh, David Portnoy." I think like we love to hate on all millionaires, which is fair. I love it. Mm-hmm. It's like, oh, he lost $7 million today. He's griping about losing $7 million. And I have to remind them, I'm like, no, he didn't. Like, it's all speculative assets. It's not like he has to cash out today, that he needs some cash to pay his rent. Like, they can just let that shit ride. And it's $7 million from the day before, not from when they first acquired those assets and how much they've grown in wealth. It's almost like an arbitrary number. So I know we like to relish, and we did have even had people encouraging them to track Tesla stocks just to make themselves feel better. Like if you could if you could have small joys, but they really aren't even losing that money.
No. And the other thing that is to remember with the Trump administration is that he's basically lined his entire administration with people from Wall Street. So like Scott Bessent, who's the Treasury, secretary, he like created the derivatives market, which is like an entirely different, it's like part of the stock exchange, but it's like valuation is like something like 10 or 15 times the entire value of the stock exchange. And it's just these like bets on whether or not stocks are going to go up or stocks are going to go down. And like these ridiculous, they're completely unregulated. And Scott Bessent, who is the Treasury secretary, created that market. That was his after the 2008 financial crisis. So like the people that are in control of the market who would be doing all these manipulations are literally the government. So that's what I think is happening, is just we're seeing these massive pump and dumps, and they're trying to encourage people to move to like digital currencies like crypto, it's all a bit dystopian. So
they really are. Have you not? A lot more bots too trying to sell the crypto than normal. It was a real push under Elon's reign.
Yeah, the crypto market is pretty nefarious too. Like they are like the people who own things like Ethereum, which is like a stable coin. So like Stablecoins are like attached to financial assets. So they're attached to like US bonds or US treasury notes. Like they're attached to something physical versus like just crypto, like Bitcoin, which is not attached to anything really. It's just like these like algorithmic kind of, buy and sell kind of ideas. But stablecoins are attached to are supposed to be attached to financial assets. And that's what they would like to switch to. But Ethereum, things like Ethereum or like the other one, or like basically the blockchain that they would put these stable coins on,
yes,
are run by some of the worst people in the world. Like quite literally, like people like pedophiles, people who are part of the mob, people who have very, very seedy, horrible pasts, who have used this type of technology in order to like proliferate things like child pornography and stuff like that. Yeah, there's like a whole very seedy underworld that's going on in the crypto markets. But that's the point, right? Is that you can do you can do things on the dark web and no one will ever be able to track you. So that's the point. And now they just want to make it legitimize it.
So yeah, I think we spend a lot of time trying to speculate as to what he was doing with these ridiculous, I mean, some of them still don't make any sense. I've seen a lot of great memes made out of that, tariff list and talking about the Penguin Island and all of that nonsense. But, when you step back and see this, I think they'll think it's worth all the ridicule if they made $90 million in a day. No way to confirm anything coming out of his mouth at the moment, right? Like, but there's Charles Schwab nodding along with him. He sure as fuck didn't correct him. So it seemed like they had already had that discussion on exactly how much they cashed in on. And I wasn't joking. There are people out there accrediting Trump for the rise in stocks. So it's like they will just, the narratives don't even make sense half the time. But this is all, leads us into the discussion on Trump's and, team. We always use him as a label to talk about this, but we know he's not calling all the shots, obviously. But the descent of the United States into fascism, and there can be arguments on whether or not like that term appropriately fits exactly the conditions that we're having right now, but that's neither here or there. If we actually run through the stories that make us start talking about fascism. And this week, I think most notably was the continued use of federal agents to suppress critics. ICE, we've talked about the use of ICE and their mass. And I was encouraged not to use deportations because it kind of validates they're not even legal deportations. They're kind of like abducting people and sending them places, rendering them. But even then, that implies criminality. So it's hard to even keep up with what you're supposed to be calling them. But, this week there was a well-known lawyer out of Michigan had been representing some of the students involved with the encampment at the University of Michigan. What is his name? I had it in my notes. Anyway, he was at a Detroit airport and was detained by federal agents. There's a video there. Joe, if you could load up that clip, because he describes what it was like dealing with them. No, not that one.
Not that one.
The one above that. So he's interviewed on CNN and the anchors asked him, you were detained and...
I don't have a video.
No? Okay.
No, there's no video there.
No, there's not. It was on. Okay. So he describes, they demanded his cell phone and he's a lawyer, obviously. And so he's like, well, I can't give you my cell phone. There's privileged information. Fine. At least just let us look through your contact list. And they make special note of the fact that he has high profile cases. They're referring to his defense of Palestinian solidarity activists. And, he wasn't arrested and he wasn't continually detained. He is free in telling his story. But the idea is like that scare tactic, right? That sends a message to other lawyers that, even traveling through airports, all of a sudden your contact list becomes up for grabs, right? And it was like, do this or you can't leave, or do this or we're going to do this. And, it has no legality. Even the lawyer's sitting there going, absolutely, like, this is not right. But like, there's so much you can do when you're trapped in a room with people and you've lost your freedom to move. So it's just one of many tactics.
It is intimidation because, because I read through briefly the article was there. There's no video clip, unfortunately, and it's exactly what they're trying to do, because it is absolutely horrifying, considering these are rights, especially when it comes to lawyers. There's a certain level of privacy that needs to be honored for lawyers, because the entire, attorney-client privilege, as it's called in the States, and we have the same, in Canada. What goes on between your conversation between yourself and your lawyer is protected, as it should be. You need to be able to freely discuss, and they need to be able to freely discuss anything going back and forth. But also trying to intimidate lawyers in regards to who they represent and what's going on. This is just horrifying, because it's luckily it's a vocation that's not easily intimidated by law enforcement. They know the law better than the police that's trying to intimidate them, so that helps. And it's usually entertaining to see some lawyers schooling the police officers that are trying to arrest them. But the second is, it's still my bigger concern as we were reading this is they're trying to access the contacts of these lawyers, which means they're going to go find them and try to directly intimidate the clients without the lawyers, and having used the lawyers' access. And I'm like, there's so many wrongs there. Like,
the lawyer's name there was Amir Makled, Makled. I wanted to make sure I dropped that because I didn't load up the clip. So then, like, I'm sure if you're on TikTok, you've seen Ginger. I love the new tact on his videos, though. He made quite a shift there in making content. And he's at a Department of Justice or some sort of hearing regarding the Department of Justice. And one of the witnesses there tells a story that we do have a video clip for, because I saw her little head pop up before. So, Joe, can you run that? And yeah.
I'll go from the beginning.
Sure.
Just testified before the committee that the Department of Justice sent her a letter warning her not to testify before this hearing today. You heard me correct. The Department of Justice sent her a letter saying, do not testify before this committee today, which is essentially witness intimidation. Her name was Liz Oyer, and she was the pardon attorney for the Department of Justice before she was one of the Doge layoffs.
On Friday night around 9:15, I learned that the Deputy Attorney General's office had directed the Department's Security and Emergency Planning Service to send 2 armed Special Deputy U.S. Marshals to my home to serve me with a letter. The letter was to be served at my home between 9 o'clock and 10 o'clock on Friday night. I was in the car with my husband and my parents when I got the news that the officers were on their way to my house, where my teenage child was home alone. Fortunately, due to the grace of a very decent person who understood how upsetting this would be to my family, I was able to confirm receipt of the letter to an email address, and the deputies were called off. The letter had been emailed to me just before 8 o'clock that night. The letter was a warning to me about the risks of testifying here today, but I am here because I will not be bullied into concealing the ongoing corruption and abuse of power at the Department of Justice.
She also just testified that she was fired from the DOJ because she refused to go along with the Deputy Attorney General's desire to return Mel Gibson's gun rights back to him, which had been taken away because he was convicted of domestic abuse. And apparently Mel Gibson is a friend of Donald Trump, and that's why they wanted to give him his gun rights back. She refused to go along with it and was fired within hours of that refusal. A witness just testified.
Mel Gibson. Of course it's fucking Mel Gibson. Like, just to add fuel to the fire. So yeah, there's
Is
a
that
lot.
a big deal?
Mel Gibson's just a piece of shit, right? Like, he's anti-Semitic, went on diatribes, right? He's been charged with domestic violence. That's why he doesn't have the gun. So, I mean, just remember that when we're talking about Polyev later on and Carney, because they wouldn't give him his guns either. Or at least Carney wouldn't have him give him his guns either. But, just the idea of using armed marshals, too, to deliver that letter. She makes that point, even though she didn't come into contact with them, that could have been the result. And they were instructed to show up at night and hand her this letter. Yeah, like this is part of fascism, right? Where critics aren't just like encouraged to be silent in many ways. They're using actual parts of the legal mechanisms. Yeah, like that's Department of Justice doing that. So, I mean, it becomes hard to find places to turn to for justice when that part of your governance has been corrupted in that way. And a lot of reports of some of this happening, ununiformed officers. That's a little scary, right? Like ICE often does that. Sometimes they put police patches on when they're not actually police, but they're in like street gear. And, you know, undercover cops have been doing that for ages. But the lawyer story he describes, you know, an officer came in, he wouldn't identify what department he was in. He wasn't in uniform. And he starts grilling me with these questions. And, you know, it creates a real atmosphere of fear, right? Not only are you keeping your eye out for uniforms, but like any old fuck can be, you know, part of the mechanisms of fascism. So they don't all actually just wear like brown shirts.
Yeah.
It's true.
That made them really easy to spot, you know, red patches, brown shirts, and like it's not like that.
So
I agree. And oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Because I'm going to go on a side tangent.
Like, the U.S. history of like using like mobster style tactics against civilians is a long-standing history. They've been doing it for a very long time. But I could digress into the fact that the CIA and that the FBI and these intelligence units are all just essentially the organized crime syndicate. So I think that is a good example of like why you can't ever trust these, these enforcement agencies, because they really just are essentially the mob and work for the mob. And there's a longstanding history for that and a lot of evidence to support it, unfortunately. But yeah, not surprising at all, unfortunately.
Yeah. My thing I was thinking about this is I was talking to my wife a couple of times when we were looking at, you know, because she's also watching these things, and the same thing we were discussing, not only with regards to this, because I remember seeing this particular story coming up earlier on this week in regards to the lady who was pulled over and intimidated, which was absolutely horrifying. But we were also talking about the fact that, you know, you still have this, and then you have ICE running around right now doing exactly as you're mentioning, and at this point, as we're discussing this, you have to wonder about the ICE officers. They know what they're doing at this point here. Like, if they weren't sure about their job in regards to enforcement and trying to protect, at this point here, you have to know. You have to know, like, what you're doing is questionable. You have to know that you're arresting some Americans. You have to know, like, how buried in the sand do you have to be? And this makes you just wonder, like, if you're still working at ICE now, and understandably that some people may be stuck there because of employment limitations, everything else, especially since you got your commander-in-chief tanking your economy.
That's like Nazi guards, though. No fucking way. Yeah. No, don't give them an out, Joe. I don't care if you need the paycheck. This is like, you know, especially seeing them sending them off to the El Salvador prison. Like, tell me the difference between that and the camps, right? Other than like the gas chambers, but. Like,
I'm sure that's on its way. Don't worry. I'm sure those things, that type of like,
but even seeing inside their own camps, they're chaining them together, giving them a mattress, stuffing them into rooms together that are just absolutely unfit for human. It's absolutely insane that at a certain point that you can't just look at that going, no, you know what, this is too much, I'm out. Like, I'm hoping at least one of them comes out and it's like, here's the video of the shit you're going on inside there that they don't want you to know.
Oh, but I mean, you can find on YouTube like the videos of what's going on in El Salvador prisons, because the president.
El Salvador, yes. I'm talking about the U.S. ones.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You're right.
The detention centers, like they're not all.
Yeah, Guantanamo Bay. How many people are over there too? You know.
Absolutely. The images out of there. And so you're talking about like maybe people leaving their jobs or speaking up, right? Is another option. laying it bare for
Whistleblowing.
folks. Whistleblowing, that's a danger because there's very little to protect whistleblowers in these days. But even in Greenland, so they have a military base in Greenland. It's supposed to be space related. So I'm just like, they're just probably so excited they still have that military base. And anyway, the whole Vance going over to Greenland and criticizing Denmark happened. And the commander of the Greenland base was like, yo, she's still got to stay there. She's got to work with these people. She's like, oh, well, like that doesn't really reflect how we feel at the base, which is probably a big no-no for somebody in that job. But I mean, we're all thinking it, I'm sure. And well, she was removed. She was promptly removed from her position. So, anybody that we do see speaking up from within these wings, within the armed forces.
I don't think it's a terrible thing for her. And the only reason why I'm saying that is like, she was there. She's had a relationship with the people from Greenland and Denmark. And he comes in there and shits all over it. And she's like, don't do that. And then, and then after completely ruin that relationship, like, you want to remove me? Fine. You guys already destroyed that relationship. I don't have to deal with it now. All right, I'm good. Let's go.
Yeah, it's scorched earth anyway, right?
Yeah.
But got an easy out. Maybe she'll get a pension out of it, or maybe somewhere warmer than Greenland she'll be stationed where it's not such a content. Maybe they'll send her to Panama, but I don't think so.
Yeah, right.
I don't think so. But there's just as I was about to log on, I realized, if we're talking about the descent into fascism, not that it's like directly related, although you can make this argument, but you know how I feel about the ballot box anyway, is the SAVE Act was also passed this week. We've talked about it just a little bit on the show. The SAVE Act is, I don't even know what the fuck the acronym stands for, but it's the one that requires people to have 2 pieces of identification in order to vote, and they have to match, meaning your name, gender at birth has to match your corresponding identification. And like, for most part, this means a passport because they don't accept driver's license or even army cards, whatever they call them. And they give them photo identification when they're in the armed services. And this started as an issue, this kind of matching your birth certificate nonsense was really starting to mostly affect trans people trying to update their identification, particularly passports, so everything matched. And it was kind of attack on trans rights. But now the SAVE Act applies this to voting. And this means a lot of people are going to be disenfranchised. Like,
it's removed from the voter bill.
Yeah.
Voter rolls.
Right. So passports cost like $120 or more if you need it quickly. And it requires a lot of backing identification to begin with, which can be difficult for a lot of people, especially poor people. It becomes a huge problem for women. I mean, even my mom right now is going through a rigmarole with Ontario Services. I'm not going to out her on why she needs to do this, but she's got to like prove, her birth certificate. She's been married twice and name changes, and she's got to like get all the paperwork to line that up in order to get where she needs to go. And it's not easy finding your old marriage certificate like through the government if you don't have it. And a lot of women are going to have to do this because they've married, they've changed their names, and they no longer match their birth certificate. So they're going to have to go get a passport or other kinds of ID. And a lot of people just will not have the time or the money or the knowledge that this is a requirement before it's time to vote again. And, when we talked about Trump during the election and making those promises that it would be the last election, and we kind of teased the Democrats for kind of jumping on that because it sounded like he was just using rhetoric and, it could be taken either way. But that's going to be a reality for a lot of people. Like, they won't be able to participate in another election, or at least maybe not the next one, unless you have some huge fundraising drive and huge, massive efforts. It's not just signing people up for their registration now. You've got to make sure they've got the proper identification. A nightmare. The numbers. Anybody remember what the numbers are of how many people will be instantly impacted?
I thought I read something like was it 60 million is what they were saying potentially?
That wouldn't surprise me.
It's insane. Yeah. So, by the way, the term, the name SAVE is Safeguard American Voter Eligibility.
Oh,
God. Of course it is. It's always something
America.
It's always a euphemism. It does everything but, right? Like it does the opposite. Yeah. Ford is famous for having bills that do like the Safer Municipalities Act. Like, no, it's not. But
it's very right wing. So it's like, we're going to make this safer.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't. And the only other thing I'm thinking of is like, well, if you had problems with women wanting to marry before, this act is not going to really encourage women to want to get married after this, or at least change their names.
Yes, change your names. I mean, I didn't change my name, but for like a whole, it's just like, I didn't understand how getting married would make me change my name. Like, that's my name. Anyway, That's me. But yeah, for sure. Now it's like a legal matter almost. Like there's real discouragement into changing your name. So folks just maybe don't. That's the least you can do, but it's hard to understand like where folks are supposed to put their energy to fight back in this moment when, even just this week, I put down so many things that would get every civil rights group up in arms and launching a campaign, except for the fact that they're probably already involved with a campaign from the shit that dropped last week. It's quite overwhelming to think about now the next election. So now you've got to start mobilizing lawyers and activists all to try to repeal that, bring that to the Supreme Court, I imagine is what they're going to do.
It's not there yet. So it's passed the House, but it needs to go through Senate. And I think the assumption is it's probably going to pass the Senate because the votes are there. So it's still a little bit ways away before it actually gets there. It's going to be going to the Senate, it looks like it went to the Senate yesterday, so it's just starting to get prepared for it. But yeah, so it's still a little ways, but yeah, it's gonna come. There's nothing that's going to be stopping it in regards to the Senate's not going to have enough unless Cory Booker does another filibuster. But even still, I don't think he's going to be able to really succeed in that one to actually stop it.
Yeah, and I bet you that there are a bunch of Democrats that probably support it anyway, so I'm sure they're all in the same team.
Yeah. It's just this one. I'm like, I don't get why they would want to support this one. This is not a good look for Democrats to do. But again, they haven't really. They are trying to recover. Yeah.
They seem to have decided that they are only going to be performative as usual, right? They've had plenty of chances to block nominees or, stop things in their tracks. Very few, but they've not taken those opportunities. And I can't imagine what they're waiting for. Something like so horrible that you'd mobilize. But that just brings us back to the main theses of everything we talk about is that like politicians will not save you, right? All of these things won't be fought by politicians. They'll have to come from grassroots organizing, and folks will have to decide what's most important at the time, because you can't be fighting on all of these fronts. And if you're Canadian, it's, you can't be looking at all of these examples either as something that just Americans have to deal with or something that's very unique to Trump's personality, which is just spun. And it's things that I can see happening here. And I'm, I can't catastrophize. At least that's what my therapist told me. But this is a reality. Folks often say Poilievre has never passed legislation. That is not true. Go find the one bill, at least I know the one, that he did mostly right. And the worst part of that bill, that it was actually fixed in the Senate and through changes before it was actually passed, he really was attacking democracy. He wanted to give have fewer oversights over elections and some of the rules around that. So there are efforts within the Conservative Party to kind of disenfranchise people or weaken Elections Canada to a point where there's going to be even bigger problems, which is funny coming from the party that's always complaining about like the legitimacy of shit in terms of the election. And it's no wonder Poilievre doesn't really fight back against this narrative. You think like his camp would have a concerted effort whenever that popped up again. Like he's never done anything. He's been nothing but a politician his whole life. I love how they call their own jobs and not a real job. Like, it's one thing for us to stand there and say, like, you've never had a real job, watching him flip the burgers and just being like, oh my God, or he's like not even really cutting that meat. But it's another thing to have like Mark Miller or whoever his opponent is in the House at the time stand up and say you've never had a real job when they're they're collecting a pretty fat check for not a real job. You might want to save that narrative for your attack dogs and your social media feeds, because I shake my head when I see that. I go, do you realize what did you hear that before you said it?
There's no self-awareness at all.
What are you showing us, Joe? Oh, yeah.
So this is the Fair Elections Act. This is one of the particular contentions that was in there, and it's come up, which is, I believe this is part of the ruling that actually got it rolled back, because the idea was, they wanted to eliminate the use of vouching and voter information cards as a form of ID. So, as we're all, I don't know if everybody's got their IDs yet, or their cards that came in, and mine came in the other day.
Yeah, I did.
But and that's kind of part of the way I go. I come in with the voter ID card. I'm able to go through and without a problem. They wanted to remove those as well as remove vouching as an option. And vouching is used quite often for a lot of people, whether because they may or may not have IDs, or they may be somebody else for whatever reasons. I've got, like myself, I got a driver's license, got the cards, got everything else. Everything's good to go. But sometimes there might be somebody who doesn't have a driver's license that might be need for the vouching. Could be somebody with, who was older that may not have their ID suddenly because for whatever reason moving or everything else. We've never really had a problem with large elections. Everybody's, regardless of what the rights keep saying, or like, there's all this election fraud. I'm like, there's no evidence of it. Neither in the States, neither in Canada. There isn't. And all of this is just to keep showing. This is always the right that keeps on just saying like, we need to fix this problem that we've scared you with this safer act and making things safer for you. Even though it's also, as this particular bill here, hang on, try to see if they've got the information here, but even though that they're looking into things that were unconstitutional just to benefit them, and I'm just like, what are you doing?
Yeah, and that's where it starts, right? You pass something like, well, they didn't actually. A lot of that didn't pass the Senate, but the bill was passed. But like, they're little testers to see how many rights we can strip of people, and it first it's the most marginalized. So folks without ID tend to be folks without homes, or folks that can't afford to go through the process of replacing that ID and whatnot. So, they start by disenfranchising some of us and see what the rest of us will do. When we're talking about some of the things that you might be able to expect from Poilievre, The Breach did a great piece. They released it. It's kind of like an inside scoop from, it tells a story of two political insiders, so to speak, having a drink at a bar and revealing what Pierre Poilievre's plan would have been had he got a majority. And I mean, like, we're still a couple weeks out. This still could be his plan. It's not anything, obviously, he would get away with, however, with a minority government. So he talks about basically copying Mike Harris. Now, if folks don't remember, or maybe you're not in Ontario, you were spared the Harris days. But what it is and you'll hear remnants of that from Trump's, like, getting as much done in a short period of time. It's kind of a blitzkrieg is what they call it in the article there. And it's like fast and furious. You don't know what to respond to, and everyone is left kind of scrambling. And it's severe austerity, right? Like government, the cutting of government spending on services. Usually it's met with also tax breaks for the rich, limits on labor laws, sometimes freezing the minimum wage. It's really ugly shit. And Mike Harris was advised to do that, and he did. He acted fast and furious, and thankfully the result was social movements and labor movements really did respond in kind. And there were wildcat strikes, there were mass mobilizations, huge rallies, really kind of shut the province down to a degree. And he had to back off some of the things that he did. But I mean, the province was still reeling from these cuts. It still is, you know, like they never repealed everything. Even though the Liberals replaced them, you know, they didn't fix it.
Weird.
I know. They said they would, but they didn't.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So, you know, we're finally getting, I think, a bit of costed platforms today. I think that's the expectation. I'm not quite sure. I was busy getting ready for the live. But, I mean, in this economy, I don't know how anybody's putting a costed platform together without knowing what tariffs are going to be and what the impact is going to be. But I think that's part of the motivation, too, of the tariffs, right? Just causing this fucking political chaos everywhere, and anything can get through. But couple of the other things that you can expect from Poilievre. I mean, you folks can chime in on what you think, because I know we shit on Carney, and we will. I've got him in my notes. We're going to shit on Carney. Don't worry, Ashley. Okay. But Poilievre doesn't like to talk a lot about his platform. Conservatives don't show up to debates a lot. And when they do release things, they're kind of really showy pieces that we'll give a little bit of air to in a second. But it's the things you can expect based on what he's said or what he's done before. And one of those is like definitely defunding UNRWA, right? The refugee agent, the UN refugee agency that assists in Gaza, in Palestine. He has been almost explicit in that. You won't see an ad put together for it, but we've seen enough of his speeches to know that that's probably what he'll do. And he definitely will not protect trans people against the provinces. Carney was pressed with that. He answered it pretty. I mean, he stumbles a lot. He's not a great public speaker, but he finally did get out the answer that absolutely they would use the Health Canada Act in some way to protect access to medical care for trans people. And like, that's a huge fucking relief for a lot of our comrades.
Carney's daughter is trans. I don't know if you knew that.
I did. I just think sometimes that it's great to mention it, but that doesn't mean people will act appropriately, right? We've seen a lot of people with autistic kids act like real ableist pieces of shit. Fair. It definitely, hopefully shaped him, but I'd like to think a decent leader gets there without that experience, but sometimes that's not true. So, I mean, if you don't believe him, you might be like, well, his daughter might at least hold him accountable if we can't. But those are some of the things I think you can expect from Poilievre.
I think you're right in regards to just because their daughter is trans won't necessarily make them a good advocate for it. I mean, so is Elon Musk's daughter.
He's got you there, Ashley.
Elon hates his daughter. Yeah, and his daughter hates him equally. So I know Elon hates all his kids.
Exactly. No, Carney has. I will say. I mean, Carney is at least still has a relationship with his daughter. Calls her his daughter, and so I don't. He hasn't. He has shown some support for the trans community. He didn't quite specifically say it in regards to, and I thought it was like, just say you support the trans community and put it away. Like that's get the soundbite out there of like, absolutely support the trans community, support the Constitution, support their protections in there, and then move on, because you know what, nobody else is going to be asking you about it, because that's it. That's all they need to hear, that assurance, and we're good. And it felt like he kind of dodged it.
I felt like he was going to that last line. He says, "We absolutely will protect it," but you were sitting there waiting for it the whole time, right? Like, is this gobbledygook? Is this going to be like, oh, I believe in all these things, and then it'll be like, but with the limitations and the current environment, or provincial jurisdiction, blah, blah, blah. Like, he could have gone either way, but he like mutters it at the very end. It's not even a good soundbite. And I've had this argument with people that are like, oh, you say you don't like politicians, but then you get somebody who can't speak like a politician, and you're like, oh, they can't. But you can still, when people are speaking honestly, they don't tend to stumble through that in the way that they do. It's when they're really calculating their words that you get that kind of hesitation and that gobbledygook that comes out, where you're not even quite sure if you got an answer. And like, they're coached to do this. So when I think at this point in the game, he's got to sharpen that up a little bit, because we're seeing the polls narrow. And I have a feeling it's like every time Carney has a presser, he doesn't necessarily say anything awful. I mean, the right wing won't like what he just announced this week in terms of gun laws, but generally it's just kind of like, I don't know, he just kind of leaves a kind of meh impression. I think someone last week was like, oh, he makes me fall asleep every time I hear him talking. And then Poilievre just generally stays out of the media, right? He's kind of barred a lot of media from his plane and calls them protesters when they're trying to ask legitimate questions. But generally, he's kind of like, there's not much to talk about when it comes to Poilievre. And so as long as that mediocrity is there, it's like, yeah, they're starting, that honeymoon period with Carney seems to be wearing off a little bit. If you believe the polls.
Yeah, right, exactly. I think
no one believes the polls when it doesn't say what they want to say.
Right, exactly. I always like to remember that the mandate of the ruling class is transnational. It's not in borders, right? It's the Western ruling class. It's Americans, Canadians, Israelis. We're all kind of lumped in. UK, the British, like all of the Western colonizers are all kind of lumped into one transnational mandate. And I feel like no matter who is in charge, unless you have like revolutionary change, you're going to end up with the same thing at the end. It's always going to be the mandate of the ruling class, no matter what. So I think Poilievre is going to be like, if he wins a minority or a majority, he's just going to do exactly what the ruling class wants, because he's not such a big player already. He's kind of like a little nothing burger to, I think, the ruling class. Like when you consider like his connections to like the real, like really people with the massive amounts of power, he has no real connections to them. So I think he's going to be like super desperate to be like their BFFs and do whatever they want. That's why I honestly, that's the energy he gives. He's just like, yes, I'm going to do everything. Carney is so much more calculated, but he's already part of the club. So I think they're going to win. The ruling class is going to win regardless if it's Carney or Poilievre. They're going to get what they want regardless. So yeah. I don't really believe anything that any of them have to say. I really only just look at like what is happening in the United States and who is and seeing that as like going to disseminate eventually into Canada. So
this particular one, I located the image, and I can probably find another one, which is they started this particular campaign a couple of days ago, and I wanted to bring a little bit of attention to this because this feels this is coming from the Poilievre camp, and this feels very American in regards to, do you believe the polls? And this, if we saw this coming from Trump, we'd like, oh no, we know what's next. Doubt the polls, and then when you get the election, and if you lose it, doubt the election results. And considering Poilievre is still sort of just like a JD Vance light, he's already they're already trying to do messaging of like, don't believe the polls are all wrong. Like, all right, there's nothing wrong with telling people not to believe the polls. Make sure to go out and vote. There's something that's good in that.
I hate polls.
Yeah, I mean, love them or hate polls. Polls are not the end all be all. They generally give you sort of an idea of the direction, particularly when you start to aggregate them. Gives you kind of a general sense. It shouldn't be your end all be all, but it'll tell you what's going on. But this also, like I said, feels more like a prelude of like
January 6th vibes.
Yeah.
Like building up to that kind of resistance, especially if it's close, right? If it's a blowout for the Liberals, which the original polls, like I said, they're getting close. These folks are speaking more to like, do you believe that the Liberals are still in the lead? And they're saying this because they've spent such considerable energy comparing rally sizes or proving rally sizes. And
oh my God.
Oh Lord. Like even I can expect that from Poilievre. I don't know why I expect better from the Liberals. Okay. But even they've got supporters that are posting videos walking along the line of people waiting to get into a rally. And it's like some sort of proof of how the public's feeling at the moment. And like none of them are actually talking about the issues, like what any of these people will do once they're in office. It's like a popularity contest. And it's funny. The one reporter, Judy Trin, that Poilievre kind of calls an activist because she asks a legitimate question in a presser. I kind of laughed when I saw her get that treatment, because just earlier that day, I had called her out, or her feed, if you look at it, just read as a regurgitation of the Conservative campaign. And I know it's her task to follow it and report on it, but nothing was critical. It was just retyping their statements, maybe throwing quotes around it, but no commentary at all. And I think, it's just people demanding this unbiased media is such malarkey. That's not what they're there for, right? They should be fact checking and questioning statements, or at least providing the implications of some of these suggested policies. It's really not reporting to go and follow the rally and then just report on its size and the quotes that came out of it, right? That could be a live feed that anybody can access. It's like, that's not journalism. It's not even close. And so, yeah, for her to get called out as an activist, I'm like, that is a long shot. I mean, he's going to take that.
Absolutely. It's and it's interesting too, because you're not like we're not the first ones to say it for sure. In regards to that, like, they're not criticizing the Polyev camp very much, and it's excuse me, it's bringing a lot of questions into it. I mean, the fact that that Pierre is only selecting very specific reporters to ask him questions, at least, it does give it a little bit of credence in regards to, they can't do the hard analysis because they can't ask him any questions. I mean, and if they do ask any questions, I wouldn't be surprised if the newsroom saying, don't ask him questions, don't give the hard stories, or you'll get completely removed. And we don't want to risk that. And I'm like, if you're doing that shit, then why are you in this? Like, why are you in this if you're just going to be parroting whatever they tell you to parrot? That's not journalism anymore. That's just free advertising.
And they'll say, like, they don't have the time, and that is the reality too. They're expected to, pump out X amount of stories. They don't have budgets for research anymore. It's really been stripped bare for this particular purpose. So I do feel for them, and that's why I try to lean on independent media. So you don't get as many stories firing out, but you get much deeper dives, and like, they're the folks not even getting paid for this shit. So yeah, when we do the headlines here, I really do try to find, I go through the Maple, the Orchard, the Breach. They're all I should have had a shorter title for my show. Everyone is very succinct. The Narwhal is another good one. There's probably some that I'm missing, and I apologize. The Thorn is a good newsletter out from BC, but otherwise, you're just getting just a skimming, like what you could just get from reading the headline, honestly, even when you read through the article sometimes. But other things from the campaign trail were a little bit of a tit for tat on law and order policies. Again, we're really dry on policies that really matter, that would make like a material difference or improvement. There'll be differences, improvement in our lives. But of course, you're going to get two basically conservative parties firing shots over law and order. Who can they jail? Who can they criminalize the most? Of course, this always leads us into a discussion about the privatization of prisons and that trajectory. But Pierre, I think, was first out the gate with a 3 strikes you're out. I don't know how many U.S. states have this, but I know California does, and I'm sure they're not the only ones, where if you're convicted of 3 crimes of a certain category, then you are locked up for life. In Canada, that is unconstitutional. I don't know if this would actually hold, but it is part of his plan and his appeal to voters there, that he would, and he said a few things already, right? Like life sentences for fentanyl, and, it is the conservative shtick, right? To do this. It's very typical. But Carney also, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I'll wait till you finish.
Okay.
Do a hard eye roll.
Yeah, nice, perfect. So Kearney also doesn't want to be outdone. He has a bit of a different tact, right? Because he's liberal, so it will differ to some degree. And his policy that he announced was to take guns from anybody convicted of serious offenses, as well as, well, not to say that it isn't a serious offense, but it's not treated as such. Domestic violence would also cause you to be able to, or cause you to lose your gun rights. And although I don't really have an opinion here or there on gun rights, to be honest, I'm not informed enough. I won't go there. I will say that it's, these are not discussions that are on the foremost of people's minds, I don't think. But, you know, Joe, you want to unroll?
So, I mean, I rolled hard. I rolled hard on Pierre's ideas. I mean, a lot of you guys know in regards to how my view was in regards to justice and the prison system. And this guy is literally like the maximum, like life in prison for fentanyl. I'm like, ah, great. War on drugs is back. Thanks, Reagan.
Yeah.
Like that's literally what that reads out to. 3 strikes, you're out. Absolutely, it's gonna get struck down too. Although I'm really, really wondering if he's gonna try using the notwithstanding on those, on any of those. And again, something else I have a huge problem with. Notwithstanding is one of the worst things we ever did in regards to the Constitution. Anything that needs to be suspending your rights should not be a law. Period.
Can the feds use the notwithstanding? I thought only the provinces could use the notwithstanding.
At least up to my understanding, I thought it was only the provinces that were able to use notwithstandings, but he said he's going to be trying to use it.
But the feds have the Emergency Act, don't they? Which is like essentially like a wartime act. Yeah.
And they can change the Criminal Act.
The Wartime Act.
Yeah.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Yeah, it replaces the Wartime Act, but I think it is in line with the Constitution. Because remember, Section 1 is rights with reasonable limitations, and the Emergencies Act falls under the reasonable limitations because it's temporary. You're able to temporarily do it, and it's only for a limit of 30 days. And even still, unlike the original War Measures Act, it didn't fully suspend your rights. Like it just allowed for things to move a little bit quicker. So,
but they can always write new legislation. So,
and we can always write new legislation, absolutely. And as much as these convoyers and right wingers like to scream that the Emergencies Act is unconstitutional, it's not. It's been challenged in regards to it, and it's not deemed unconstitutional to use it. And again, it's just not something we use all the time. And in some cases that we just don't use it in regards to something of the scale like the convoy. Sometimes it's just they'll use it in regards to, there's a natural disaster. This is just going to unlock funds and allow to mobilize what we need to help people that are just in a disaster area. So, but again,
I think. I saw Carney. I think also talked about fentanyl too. There was in his law and crime mandate. I think there was a whole bunch of stuff about fentanyl in there too, as well as like some other stupid things like the Canada Community Security Program. So, which essentially prevents private funding to a whole bunch of like to reduce hate motivated crimes, which we all know what that really actually means. So.
Yeah, I'm very curious in regards to the hate motivated crime because this is where I'm like, whose hate are we talking about here?
Right.
Oh,
the Israeli lobby. That's who they're talking about.
Yeah.
They don't actually care about hate motivated crimes. Yeah.
I want to talk about that for a second because you've got Leslie Church is a candidate for the Liberals in Toronto. I can't remember. I think University of Rosedale, but I might be wrong. No, that's Freeland. Toronto St. Paul's. Anyway. She, there's a little Facebook story that I stumbled across of someone going into the office, and one of the first pamphlets that they're met with there is all about bubble laws. Toronto being one of the cities that is contemplating will pass a bubble law. They're not the first. And if you don't know what that is, we're talking about legislation to prevent protests in certain areas around vulnerable institutions. This is churches, daycares, community centers, religious institutions, probably fucking MPs' offices, whatever. The list will probably be long. But so this is we're talking about a federal candidate pushing this. And why? Because that is something Carney has also mentioned. It's something that may come down as a federal law so that all these different municipalities don't have to go through the trouble of creating a law. They will just do it from above. So to have the Liberals kind of promising this, and it's between the Liberals and the Conservatives, really, I'm so sorry everybody else who thought maybe you had a shot, but the reality is we can expect these kinds of limitations on our ability to protest to be law no matter who wins. So when Ashley says, Capitol will have a winner no matter what, so will the Israeli lobby. Because on top of that, Carney just fucking right stepped in it when it came to speaking for Palestine. I mean, we all knew where he sat. I mean, if you've been paying attention, but there's a lot of hopefuls out there that want to think that this is, and they want to find some sliver of hope. And I get being at that point, but this is not that. The man, first of all, wouldn't even address a protester at his rally, which isn't all that unusual, but to hear his fans shout them down, Carney, over top of this person asking questions about an arms embargo. Then the motherfucker lies about the arms embargo, saying that it's in place when it is in fact not in place. And I've got a million resources to that end. I did not prepare them for this discussion, but he lies about that. And then following up, Alex Koch reports, he's with the Maple. Hopefully I'm getting these all right. Yeah, Alex Koch with the Maple. And he reports that Carney kind of backtracks on the term genocide. He won't commit to calling it a genocide. And there has been follow-up, and he gave a gobbledygook answer. And so, that's where they stand on that as well. So, I mean, we can give you some examples.
A crazy story about the Israeli lobby. It's a short story, but I will tell you. So I've talked a lot about Mark Carney's connections to the Bronfman family, and who are like Bloomberg Asset Management. They are literally quite one of the richest families in the world, most incredibly prolific. They fund the Liberal Party of Canada. They fund the Democrats. They fund the Republicans. They fund the Likud party in Israel. Like, these people are everywhere. They own everything. Okay. But did you know that Samuel Bronfman, the OG Bronfman, okay, when they ran a bootlegging operation. They're also the Jewish mob on top of that, by the way. So they ran a bootlegging company for a very long time. But in 1947, Shimon Peres, so he came down to Canada and said, guess what? I need some arms. Okay, this is 1947, so in advance of the Nakba. They said, we don't have any, we're in Israel. There was an arms embargo at the time, Israel and in the Middle East. And he said, listen, I need some weapons. And so Samuel Bronfman went to the Canadian government and said, listen, can you sell us some of your arms that you're no longer using from the Second World War? And the federal government sold to Shimon Peres that Samuel Bronfman personally paid for, over $1 million of arms, which in today's money is like billions of dollars. Like, they sold it to them for half price. And that weaponry was used to commit the Nakba. That weaponry. And Shimon Peres, by the way, went on to develop Israel's nuclear doctrine. He developed and was the reason why they have nuclear weapons. That's that man. And he is, if you read his obituary from 2016, from the CBC, like from many credible news sources, they talk so lovely about him. He was a great friend to Canada. He was very good friends with Pierre Elliott Trudeau. Justin Trudeau went to his funeral. He knew the Bronfmans. He knew 3 generations of Bronfmans. They were excellent friends to him. Like, when talking about any type of Israeli, we have to understand, I think, that the people who fund Israel and Israeli politicians are the same people who fund Canadian and American politicians and UK politicians. It's the same people. It's the same oligarchy. It's the same group of
They don't want to believe that, Ashley.
Yeah.
They don't want to believe that. They don't want to believe that. There has to be separation between Canadian and American oligarchs.
There's
and
not.
I know, but
it's
don't you find, because I know you say this a lot, don't you find that is a massive barrier there? But because our whole identity is built on distinguishing us from greedy, violent Americans, right? With no healthcare.
We are.
Right.
Yeah.
That's it. That's it.
America. We are just like a more lighter version of the United States, but our philosophies, people who run our countries and who've always run our countries, are fully in line with our American brethren. And the other thing we need to so how incredibly embedded, the CIA. So people think about the CIA as like being a government institution. Yes, in some ways it is, but it is mostly, if not entirely, Wall Street and the organized crime syndicate combined. That is what it's always been. Like, it was from the Second World War. They worked with like major mobsters like Mayor Lansky and Lucky Luciano to like roll out huge operations. Like, they've always been embedded in the CIA, and the CIA just essentially moved on. And that's why the CIA is so heavily involved in organized crime, like in drug proliferation, in the dealing of arms in their communities. Like,
you're definitely getting this episode flagged.
Sorry, yeah. Fascism, right? Like, that's their deal. But
all the
because
keywords.
they're so entrenched in the
NSA is listening right now.
Oh yeah.
The viewer just went up one.
Like, but the CIA, the CIA. Anyways,
yeah, like build a bear. You need a new term. Build a bear.
But the national security apparatus is so entrenched in Canadian politics and Canadian everything that we do, like our healthcare, our policing. It's all embedded within it. And like, I firmly believe that Mark Carney is a national security asset. 100%. I believe that he works for the American national security apparatus. And that's like based on like his very long-standing relationship with the Jewish mob, the Italian mob, the all of these little crime syndicates that run essentially huge swaths of our financial systems, Wall Street, you know. So anyways, we have to think about, people have to think about this when they think about the national security apparatus. They have to think about it as being transnational, not limited to the United States, and that there are many players who feed into it. That there's not just like it's not like a little bordered thing. It's all of the colonizing countries are part of it because we all have the same goals, you know?
Yeah, I think it's more. If you had said that maybe 5 years ago, or maybe a little bit longer, people would be like, oh, she, tinfoil hat, like sounds like such a conspiracy theorist. But when you see the world collectively responding, or at least the powers that be, to the genocide, oh, what genocide? Here's some weapons under the table. It just like reaffirms that for folks, which is sometimes a good thing, that it has to get so bad that it becomes so fucking obvious as to who's working with whom, right? Because they can't hide it anymore, because they're desperate, because we've put the pressures up, or, we're witnessing it, and they've got to come up with an explanation for it that we might buy. But, when you say, and I know you have a lot of examples of this, but people believe this too, even if they're like, okay, we know we're connected. We know we're just as bad. We're capitalists and imperialists, but we're not as bad. I did an interview with Tyler Shipley, and him and Eve Ongler as well have so many examples that they've collected of how we're actually much, much worse. That what we do is often, just like Ashley described, so covert. Like, even when the Americans wouldn't sell them weapons, because it was too politically risky, Canada was like, don't worry, we've got you. And there's a lot of examples how we've been ahead of them in the dirty business, trying to almost outdo them, but still maintaining this facade of peacekeeping. It almost gives us this availability, right? Here's the distraction, and meanwhile we are, arms embargo, we've got it. No, we don't. And this is throughout history. Haiti, Congo, resource extraction companies that we don't even talk about. We don't even brag about the fact that we're like huge in mining, right? Like, it's a huge industry. It's like the basis of Canadian economy. And like, we do not advertise that fact. Why? Because they are fucking criminals with massive human rights abuse records and violations. Thank you. Like, court case rulings against them. Like, there's just no hiding that. So we just like don't even bring it into our national identity at all. And so we're not liked, but that is the vision that we sell. Even when we concede that we behave this way, some people are like, well, we're just not as bad. That's bullshit.
Canada has been at the forefront of eugenics since the whole idea of eugenics has been a thing, right? Like, we've been at the forefront. Like, our residential schools were used by, the Germans to starve people. That's how they knew how little they could feed them, was because they had done those experiments on Indigenous children. Like, the eugenics model, like when you look at MAID, right? Like how incredibly prolific MAID is in Canada, and it's just like this, like, oh, we are so great, we'll help you die, except for that, you know, it's literally eugenics, and that Canada funds a lot of eugenics projects, like the Justin Trudeau, or not the Trudeau Foundation, not the Justin Trudeau Foundation, the Trudeau Foundation is largely embedded in the Wellcome Trust. And the Wellcome Trust is like a British massive billion conglomerate, right? They fund basically all medical research that would be too unpleasant for it to come out of public funds. Okay, they tend to invest in like things like transhumanism and eugenics. They literally fund the Eugenics Institute in the UK. The Wellcome Trust is a dystopian nightmare. If you're ever interested in learning about healthcare and how bad it is, the Wellcome Trust is a good place to start. But the Trudeau Foundation is embedded in that. Like they share a lot of their resources. A lot of people who get scholarships to the Trudeau Foundation go and work for the Wellcome Trust. So these people have a long-standing history. Canada's a long-standing history of being in favor of eugenics and practicing eugenics, something that a lot of people think is like reserved for the Americans or like the United States, but it's not. Like, I mean, we are a gold standard here. And our history is pretty deplorable. And most people know nothing about our history, absolutely nothing about Canadian history. So it's really bad once you start to look at it.
Yeah, I encourage folks to look up Tyler Shipley and some of the books that he's done. One of the books he has is titled Canada's Colonial Imagination, right? Because it's like the image that we have of us is not actually real. So he doesn't call it an identity. It's largely based in fiction. And then he gives the historical examples to back up the fact that how we see ourselves is not how we are at all as a nation, either now or historically. Joe, what do you have queued up there? My screen is so small, and I want to make sure.
Oh, it's okay. We've already moved on from there.
That was, so sorry.
No, that's okay. It was in regards to Carney, and this is we'll bring it up here.
People have to see it now.
Yeah,
because I'm talking about it.
So this is a bit of a strange one in regards to Mark Carney. So this was from a while back, and the post I brought up from January 25 from Dr. From Rabbi David Mibasir, and this is Mark Carney with the Ottawa U Palestinian Student Association, and this is where there's a lot of people getting kind of upset in regards to he's here at the Palestinian Students Association. Possibly showing support. And so there was a lot of confusion as to why he's here, and then suddenly we're getting a lot of sort of backpedaling. And this is starting to get people a little bit upset. Like, he's not clear, he's not speaking out on it. And again, when people were directly asking him questions about it, he's completely dodged it. And we know why. I mean, that's
yeah. His handlers would know. I mean, we know his handlers are the Bronfmans, and they are, like I said, they literally gave the arms to Israel to commit the Nakba. I think Mark Carney is very. I think he's being told by his handlers that he needs to like try and get the vote, but he can't be explicit in anything he says. And people are very reactionary. Nobody has any real sense of like politics. So when people see things, they immediately get so excited about this stuff, going, oh my God, he's pro-Palestine, without really knowing who Carney is, his history, who his allegiances are, and then understanding that those allegiances are far more important to him than doing the right thing or, you know, being a decent human. Like he is who he is. He's shown us who he is for the last, you know, he's been Mark Carney doing Mark Carney things since he appeared, went from literally Goldman Sachs to the Federal Public Service immediately, like worked at Goldman Sachs, then worked for the Federal Public Service, starting in 2007, 2005. Anyways, doesn't matter. He moved from Wall Street into the Federal Public Service. And people think that his allegiance is not to the Wall Street. Like he was brought into the Federal Public Service for a reason. You know, that's why.
Oh, agreed. He has made some pro-Palestine statements also in the past, but again, this is where people get kind of, you know, sucked into the whole like, well, he seems to be pro-Palestine because it does not like.
If he won't call it a genocide, he can't say that it's a genocide when all of the courts have said it's a genocide. That's a huge red flag. And people are just we're so desperate. We are so desperate to, one, keep Polyev out of office that I get it. And we are all so desperate to find any kind of sign that Canadian government will do something to end this genocide. But it's not going to be from this man. I don't give a shit what you read in his bio. It's not going to come from this man. So let's go to the good news. Let's go to the disruptive updates. They're mostly,
I just want to say one more crazy story about Mark Carney, okay? Because this is another one that I think is really, people are, again, so willing to overlook. So, you know how everybody hates Elon Musk, okay? Well, did you know that Mark Carney, while he was the chair of Bloomberg Asset Management, his Bloomberg Asset Management gave Elon Musk $250 million to buy Twitter. $250 million. And people were like, oh, well, that wasn't Mark Carney. That was like their basically their venture capitalist arm of the firm. It doesn't matter. Okay. It was the largest check that they had ever written. Okay. For venture capital, the largest check. Mark Carney was the chair of the board of directors. He absolutely signed off on that check. But the exact same year, Mark Carney was also sitting on the board for Stripe payments. That exact same year in 2022, Twitter signed a deal to bring Stripe payments on as their payment mechanism, as their payment platform. So he was sitting on the board of directors for Stripe payments and on Bloomberg Asset Management, and then gave Elon Musk $250 million to buy Twitter at the same time that they had agreed to bring Stripe payments on as their payment platform.
Ugh.
Like, are we losing our minds here? Like, the man it's all inside jobs, and the man is so freaking corrupt, and people who don't think he's connected to the Trump administration are delusional.
Yeah, but Polyev. That's all you're going to get in response. But Polyev.
He has a friend who's friend with JD Vance. Okay, well, Mark Carney's friends with Peter Thiel. Okay, so Peter Thiel owns JD Vance. Big little fish, big fish.
Yeah, no, there's just so much history in the Canadian political system that tells us the Liberals are, the softer, gentler version. And
it's better marketing.
That's going to take a lot of TikToks to undo, or the proof will be in the pudding, unfortunately, when Carney comes in and somehow people think an economist is going to improve the material conditions of the working class. Then,
a Wall Street economist on top of that.
Wandering around the debate spaces, because that's something I do quite a bit. The one point I'd say from the Liberal side and the Conservative side. The Conservative side has been sort of the same thing all week, which is crowd size. Look at his crowd size. Like aside from Pierre talking about it, they are just sunk into this idea of the crowd size means something. And it's absolutely incredible just how quickly they've gone into it. As for the Liberals, it's kind of been the same thing on for at least past 2 weeks, which is criticism of Carney tends to be very, very touching. People are very protective of it. Like don't criticize Carney.
We know. Ashley's had to do like videos just dedicated to like almost like leave me alone. Like
Did you see that horrible video of that woman calling Mark Carney Big Daddy?
No, I was spared.
Oh,
you got to come with links if you want us to play clips like that. But no, I felt that vibe. I
don't want to see it again. But you know what I mean? It's definitely MAGA vibe. But yeah. The woman calling Mark Carney Big Daddy. And then the Liberal Party like reaching out to her, being like, oh, we love that.
Oh no, not another content creator collaboration. I don't want to go back to last week and talking about the NDP and their they didn't even come up in the whole discussion about elections. Like, that's pretty fucking sad. And I went through my notes, man. I will give any opportunity. I do have something I could shit on them about, but it's kind of I'm gonna hold on to that one for a minute. But they're kind of neither here or there this week. So I think like the one thing you can mention about the NDP is that they have shifted their narrative to like that very annoying Jagmeet talking about when I'm prime minister nonsense, rather than talking about here's what my strategy will be as, opposition or third, fourth party, like a realistic plan, because that's really what people want. they understand the limitations of the NDP in their current situation. And to have him just stand there and kind of talk like he's going to be prime minister tells you that there really is no plan should they not get that, right? Like we saw them kind of fumble through their agreement with the Liberals. They didn't get credit for anything. Even things that got passed are really not left-wing standards. And so, yeah, they just kind of shifted tack there. We'll see if that plays out any differently in the polls, because they're just almost absent in a lot of ridings. But let's go to the disruptive updates. So this is where we get to talk about things that are generally going right. I mean, sometimes I have tough updates, but generally I do try to share victories or calls to action here. So yes, the headlines are bad, but there are people working on the situation. So what can I start with? Well, we said we kind of go from global down to the local, and we talked about elections and politicians. It seems, yeah. And even in the comments here, we're talking about Sean Orr out of Vancouver, a socialist, just won a seat on the city council by a very wide margin. He didn't just squeak through. Two progressive candidates, but I'm not talking about the other one right now, even though they secured over 32,000 votes. Sean got 34,000 votes. The next possible contender was like 11,000 or 10,000. So a massive margin. And I don't mean like you could kind of look at Sean's policies and say he's a socialist. He's an open socialist. I mean, I used to submit articles to Sean for what's that publication that the Socialist Caucus does? I mean, for years he has been doing work with Canadian socialists. He has been on the front lines in defending people against evictions. I don't mean just like making a soundbite, like he was there, and he is pro-safe drug supply. And one thing about BC politics that is a little different from folks in Ontario, where the hosts here are from, but maybe not all of you, is they do have party politics in municipal politics. I mean, we know what color some of our candidates would likely fly at home should they have an election sign on their lawn, but they don't officially come under party lines. But the COPE party in Vancouver, really, they're the ones that Sean is with there. They mounted a fantastic campaign. And this is coming from someone sitting in Toronto that just consistently saw his campaign come over my feed. I mean, he was hosting comedy nights and all kinds of public events and barbecues. And I mean, this was a huge campaign on top of the deep canvassing that COPE has been doing since they were founded, right? Vancouver has a very right-wing mayor right now under the ABC party. And they are just doing horribly. Like, the reaction is in the votes too, but it's not just a reaction to how bad their mayor has been. It really is a testament to the kind of campaign that they launched. So we talk about the futility of campaigns a lot on the show, and you know, whether we can make inroads when it comes to politics or can we win an election. I mean, Sean says yes, we can. I mean. He did it. So yeah, that was a huge moment, I think, for a lot of socialists out there, because you do have a lot of them running in the federal election. They're either running as independents, or you're going to see some of them under the Communist Party of Canada, or maybe the Marxist-Leninist Party. There might be other banners I'm missing. I'm sorry. But they don't do very well, right? They don't. It's been a long time since we've had that kind of win, and from an open socialist. So imagine the Americans find out that we actually have real commies in government. They'll feel so validated.
Yeah.
Those communists. Yeah. They're going to be.
Yeah.
Carmen's adding to the discussion here in the comments. Thank you, Carmen. And I did see this. 40 minutes, you're lucky. I've seen comments that the election in Vancouver was fucked up. The mayor made some changes to make it harder to vote, and the result was really long lines. So to still get that kind of voter turnout, considering the barriers that were put in place, makes it extra impressive. Carmen says there, yeah, they waited 40 minutes to
I remember
cast a
seeing some
ballot.
videos. Yeah, I remember seeing some videos and articles about this particular election being like they were saying like this is insane. People are waiting hours in lineups. Like this shouldn't be happening. This shouldn't be necessary. But again, this is American tricks that we're seeing up here. We shouldn't have these tricks actually even like we shouldn't have people able to interfere with the election up here in regards to make the wait times longer, make the make polling more challenging and difficult. Like we have a separation in regards to elections. For example, like Elections Canada is separate from the government, so that it cannot be interfered with. It is mandated to do elections and management of it whatsoever. You can't mess with the lines. It needs to be its own independent governing body. If not, you've got American stuff going on, and we don't want that. So I'm just still shocked that Vancouver was able to get away with that.
Yeah, like I'm happily shocked. And one thing that doesn't surprise me now, though, unfortunately, is what Sean is facing. And I don't want to spend too much time on it. I hope he isn't spending too much time on it. And that is, he is under a massive attack by the Israeli lobby. Obviously, he is pro-Palestinian, as any good socialist should be. And any socialist, not even good one. I mean, like, but that's besides the point. So obviously the usual suspects like CJA, but I mean, there's no shortage of them spending their resources launching a campaign using shit that they didn't even bother drag up during the campaign because it's just absolute trash. It's a sarcastic reply to a clearly anti-Semitic troll online. Don't pull it up. Like, it's just not even worth the space. The thing that makes me most mad is, like, you can expect that. Almost all socialists in a place of power that you can see get brought down by these very allegations, right? So Sarah Jama, she describes herself as a socialist or at least an anti-capitalist. We saw her get taken down with very similar, not taken down, I mean, well, she's not in office anymore, but she's still doing good work. Jeremy Corbyn is a famous example out of the UK. And I mean, I myself, they tried to use those types of smears to remove me from the NDP. And they threw a content creator under the bus, just this week using this. So it does play into politics a lot. They are often able to silence politicians using this. So I get most upset when I see them feeling like they have to respond. And like, I can't judge them because I'm not in that spot right now. And it's not like I didn't respond when I was under attack, but like, I didn't have like this job to do, right? Like I didn't have like all of these massive things that Sean will have to fight in council, like legitimate battles with a right-wing mayor, that he has to spend his energy crafting and releasing responses to just bullshit. Right. So not only is it trying to like pressure him to resign a seat that he just got with a massive mandate, but silence him, make him question every time he needs to post about Palestine or something controversial, and taint him in the eyes of the public that just voted for him. But, I would like to see politicians just like, continue to stare down range a little bit and not get pulled into those conversations. We'll do those fighting for you.
Yeah. I like I said, it's the transnational agenda, right? That like there is a clear-cut agenda by the ruling class to ensure that socialist communists are never allowed to platform themselves. And the Israeli lobby has been very beneficial to the ruling class in order to like bring down anybody who has a moral conscience, because they slander them as saying that they're anti-Semitic. But you say Jeremy Corbyn, and this story always kills me because, again, I think about like when you have to follow the breadcrumbs a little bit, Keir Starmer was served in the Jeremy Corbyn cabinet many years ago when Jeremy Corbyn was the prime minister. And he attended the Trilateral Committee, which is like our Trilateral Commission, which is a Henry Kissinger CIA run meeting. Okay, friends, like we're talking about like high level, like war criminal type, like I said, run by Henry Kissinger. And also I think the Rockefellers. So good, some excellent CIA folk there. But the explicit outcome of that meeting in one of the last years of Jeremy Corbyn's prime ministership was to remove him as the prime minister, to not allow him to get reelected. That was the outcome of that meeting. By the way, Mark Carney was the governor of the Bank of England at that time, serving under Jeremy Corbyn as well. So,
you always find a way to bring Carney into this.
There's just so many connections. And Mark Carney has attended the Trilateral Commission multiple times, right? Yeah. Same idea as the Bilderberg meetings. These are CIA-run meetings. These are like the CIA folks who serve on them, who run them. You just have to say Henry Kissinger, okay? Like literally the world's worst war criminal. So like there are,
I don't know.
There's
people competing for that now.
I don't know. He's dead now, at least. But there's a
it's like retiring undefeated.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, you know, Henry Kissinger wrote a book with Eric Schmidt from Google, and the outcome of that book that they wrote, it was not written that long ago. It was about AI, and the outcome of that book was that basically either AI is going to take over the world and we're going to end up in technocracy, or there will be a popular revolution. That was the end of their book.
B. I choose B.
Take it from the mouths of the oppressors, okay? They're already telling us what the outcome needs to be. Popular revolution.
needs to be. I'm not sure they put it that way, but I would.
Right? Yeah, but that's what they're afraid of. That's really what they're afraid. They're telling us right in verbatim. They're saying we're afraid of popular revolution. They are afraid of socialism. They're afraid of communism because that is actually only the real threat to capital. And so you see these folks that are being slandered by all angles, by institutions that have been trying to legitimize themselves over the years, like the Israeli lobby, when in fact they are just fascists and they're genocidal maniacs. So and part of the capitalist class. So you can see all the connections. You gotta pull up the thread. Yeah.
All right, I'm not sure if you're going to be able to work Carney into these next few stories, but you can try. That'll be your challenge. That'll be your challenge, Ashley. But I mean, I'm sure we can.
The answer already. She'll find it.
Yeah, no, I know. And she'll have like stats too. It won't just be like, oh, in spirit, did you
Ash is ready to unleash her inner Charlie Day. It's all connected.
I know. I've got to put a set of clips together, and like it would just blow people's mind. It would be like this whole YouTube documentary on Ashley taking down Carney.
The chaos of the Bronfman family, just in the relation to is just so insane. Like they've literally funded a sex cult for a very long time, like the Nixium cult. Like that is a whole other thing. They helped overthrow the Gaddafi government. Like I'm telling you, these people are insane. Like
Ashley, the keywords, girl.
I think it's just a checklist, and she's hit them all.
She is. That's what you're working on. This bingo card of like NSA fucking flag words. The BOMB is just the one that's missing, right? Like, let's just let's move on. Okay. So about 2 weeks ago now, we had hunger strikers on the Blueprints of Disruption podcast. So there was 3 students from UBC and UBCO, which is Okanagan. Campus of UBC, and they went on hunger strike, some of them for 12 days. And this was just a part of a longer 16-month campaign, obviously, that really peaked with the encampments last summer. But this has been constant pressure on their administrators to divest from weapons manufacturers. And finally, the folks at UBC got a little bit of movement. Now, true to form, whatever they've given us is not enough, so the fight isn't over. But this is the first time that UBC has even bothered to respond. So the students issued a statement there. It's really lengthy. You can go to their Instagram, UBC Divest, to really get into why the response is insufficient. But the university has promised to take social justice into consideration when deciding on investments. So even though they claim to be a social justice institution, that hadn't been part of their mandate before. So, before you could be a war profiteer and claim that you are dedicated to social justice. So how that translates into Israeli weapons manufacturers or, cutting ties with them academically, that is still on the table. There's also other funds that need to be redirected. So like I said, the fight isn't over, but they finally got a response from UBC. So, I messaged them and I said, drop, because, when they went on hunger strike, they they spoke of this analogy of a water cup getting filled. And when you do what you do, you never know what drop you're going to be in that cup. And often when we look at movements, we only see the end result. We only see the spillover, that moment when that last drop did breach the threshold needed, but you don't know what drop you're contributing. So you just keep going drop by drop by drop. And so every little bit is making a difference. So, it's having realistic goals to and outcomes when you do these actions. Like they stopped eating, but they didn't believe like even when they started to have damage to their body, they didn't believe like that would be the thing that moved the university or the world, but they knew they were doing whatever they could do to get some movement, and they did. So shout out to the students at UBC who are still holding it down. It's not an easy space to be right now on campuses in Canada or the United States advocating for Palestine. So any victory is a good victory. And just know that all these encampments and student groups, not like all of them, but many of them are networked together. And so they're leaning on one another and learning from one another. And so this victory will help boost some of the other works on other campuses as well. I shared in the Instagram story right before I went online for Blueprints of Disruption. University students at Waterloo are also escalating actions on their campus. McGill is being faced with a lot of retributions. So there's a campus near you where there's a group that needs your support. So find them and plug in. You can check our feed. We follow most of them. So you can look at who we follow if you're looking for folks that are doing good work. Another thing that we talk a lot about on Blueprints of Disruption is tenant organizing. I get so excited when I talk about this because I feel like it's like the secret. It's like the answer. When you think of like some neighborhoods having 80% tenants in them, you can only just imagine what mobilizing them could do, right? And generally across the country, it's like between 30 and 35% of us are tenants. So tenant unions are springing up all over the place, but that isn't news because we've talked about that. But they did have a victory here. So one of the tactics being used successfully by tenant organizers is to go after the landlord, a shared landlord. That quite often will mean multiple buildings. And trust me, if that fucker is not fixing your stuff, he's not fixing his other tenant stuff. And if he's trying to evict you to gentrify the neighborhood, there's likely another building he's doing the same. I say he, but it could be anybody, but it's usually he. From the stories that I've shared so far, it's always been a he. I'm sorry, Joe. This one is Michael.
This one's also got a name too, so
yeah. So he's not. We will name and shame him because that is another one of the tactics that is being used. Like posters, make sure they're not just an anonymous landlord, even if they might hide behind a numbered company. He is Michael Klein, and he is notoriously a bad landlord. And many, many chapters of ACORN and tenants have been going and fighting him at the landlord tenant board and in other ways. But 2 buildings were successful this week in staving off rent evictions. They claim, one of the reasons they claim that they are being successful at the landlord tenant board, which is notoriously slanted towards landlords, it's stacked with landlords, and is that one, they go multiple tenants after one landlord. So it's not just like one by one, apartment 519 is fighting the eviction and so on and so on. It's like the collective of the building is fighting the entire idea behind the eviction. And on top of that, they encourage as many people as possible to be at the hearings. These are often online and are in Ontario. I'm pretty sure they're still only online. Anyway, so the organizers, or like ACORN in this instance, will send out a link where anybody from home can witness the hearing. It tells the judge and the landlord that people are watching this process. And that has, whether that's the thing or the fact that these landlords are just pieces of shit and it's so obvious that you have to make this ruling, but they're saying like it does contribute to the success. So when you see tenant organizers plead with you like 9 or 10 o'clock, can you just log on? You can just have that on Zoom on your phone or on your computer running in the background. You don't actually even have to witness it, but you just kind of be an observer there and they see how many people are watching from the gallery. And it's just one way you can help these tenants if there's just like no other way. It's really a lot of people message me and say, like, I can't get into the streets. It's just, I can't do this, I can't do that. And that is the reality. But online, there's still ways you could prop some of this work up. Many ways, actually, many ways. So yeah, I always like to share the landlord losing, because some people think like once you get an eviction notice, that's it, you're done. So the advice ACORN gave in their post, oh, you've got the points up. Thank you, Joe. It really is. I mean, you might not be able to start a tenant union, but I can guarantee you that there's one near you that will help you or allow you to get to point B there, which I think is get representation. So they will have a lawyer or contacts for a lawyer or some kind of representation, so you don't go at it alone. You don't have to have a tenant union to fight your landlord. It does help. It should be your end goal. But yeah, there's ways to get at that. And make sure you log on if you see folks asking for help. Oh, do not move. That's the key point there that I didn't say. Like I said, like some people won't even get a notice and they'll just get their landlord going, you're out, I'm evicting you, and they'll start looking for somewhere to live. Or they will get a notice and don't realize you can actually challenge that at the landlord tenant board. Or they will get the notice, do know their rights at the board, but they don't know there's people out there to help them. So the first thing is to just not start moving. There is a process folks have to go through in order to legally evict you. So that's sometimes half the battle. Going back to my notes. So that was a tenant victory. There was an Indigenous rights movement victory, not here on Turtle Island, but in New Zealand. We talked about this bill that was going through the New Zealand Parliament ages ago, and no one ever thought it would actually pass, but it was very upsetting. It was the right-wing party in Australia attempting to rewrite their constitution, essentially to remove the designation of Maori, of being Indigenous, of acknowledging the colonial past, right? It came from that stupid approach of equality from equity, meaning if we just start everybody at the same starting point, that's equal, right? We don't give you a hand up if we don't give you a hand up. And that kind of ignores the imbalances that are there materially and socially and politically. And so it's kind of saying, well, this is how we'll have equality, by just treating everybody the same. So if folks can think of that image, you might have seen of people trying to watch a baseball game over a fence. So some people are trying to look through the fence. Some people have been lifted up so they can see over the fence. Or you could just remove the fucking fence. Like sometimes you don't get that frame. Sometimes that's not part of the meme. You could actually just take the fence down and everybody can see. But so right-wing politicians did this as a bit of a test balloon. They knew it wouldn't pass, but they wanted to have this conversation in the public, and they say as much. And that might sound like honorable. We want to have a referendum. That's the language they use. We wanted to see how people felt about it, have an open discussion. But that's like reopening the abortion question. Don't ask us to praise you for doing that when what you really brought up is like this disdain for any kind of initiatives that would assist Indigenous people in New Zealand, the Maori people there. And, when it was suggested, it brought tens of thousands of people into the street. It was huge backlash. And sure enough, what was the vote there? 112 to 11. So, it never had a chance, but that doesn't mean it didn't occupy a lot of the space politically in New Zealand. So that was a decent update. I mean, it was expected, but it's just like there's governments out there that are attempting to do that. So in Canada, when I talked about the story before, I reminded you, like, we had the white paper here in Canada, and there was genuine attempts to just pretend like colonialism never happened. And, he made it sound like we won't call you Indian anymore. We'll get rid of the Indian Act because it's so oppressive, which it is. Like, it's a fucking problem. But their solution was just like, there'll be nothing then. And we just start again. We'll start again like nothing happened. All right. Like nothing happened. And
we'll take all your land and your resources and we'll call it even.
that probably resonates with a lot of people who don't understand equity, right? Or actual equality and how to get there, right? Like they're like, well, that sounds fair. We treat everybody the same. You kind of teach your kids a little bit, treat everybody the same. And but that's definitely not a realistic approach. It's been tried and tested and failed. So
yeah, especially when you have some of the worst people in the world rolling out or deciding what is equity, deciding what is equitable, like who's the one deciding these things? Bad people.
Definitely. So anybody have any disruptive updates? Did you notice any direct actions or things that happened around you that you wanted to share with folks? No, people aren't shit disturbing where you are. That's not on your feed.
We're both in the National Capital Region, and people here are very are not as rebellious. It's a government town,
Rebellious people come here, not the people in here.
They don't exist here. Yeah.
Well, you're about to have a very busy weekend, right? Because tomorrow in Ottawa is the National March for Palestine. So busloads of people will be entering Ottawa to march on the Hill to demand an arms embargo. We are not asking for a ceasefire anymore. That seems trivial. It's short-lived. It's not the solution. The focus is back on an arms embargo. And so I know buses are running out of Belleville, Mississauga, Hamilton, Kitchener, Waterloo. And that's just in Ontario, so I apologize. But if you go to the Palestinian Youth Movement, they will have a lot of information, and there's so many branches. But another thing that's happening this weekend in terms of the Palestinian Solidarity Movement is there's Palestine on every corner. They're ramping. That'll be on April the 15th. I should have had the link so folks could see the graphics. I apologize. That's for votepalestine.ca. That's a website we've talked about before. They're trying to just get Palestine on the agenda and to highlight candidates who have made base level kind of promises around Palestine or agreed with the statements that they have there. So you can go to their website. You can see which politicians. They have way too many fucking liberals listed there for my understanding. But alas, so you'll find local organizations everywhere on the 15th doing like postering, flyering, really entry-level stuff. You don't have to bring any supplies. You just show up and add a body to the cause. If you can't participate in person, they're suggesting spending that day, the 15th, calling, emailing, and tweeting, or, getting on social media at these politicians and demanding them to talk about to Palestine, finding out their position on Palestine and just like upping the pressure that they feel. So again, that's what are they calling it? Palestine on Every Corner National Canvassing Day on April 15th. Another thing, we talk about tenant organizing, and a lot of people don't know where to start. But the good news is there's a lot of organizations out there that like what they do is facilitate more tenant unions, and they have educational webinars and gatherings all the time to teach people how to, what your rights are, how to push up against landlords, and then how to organize a tenant union. And they had a big one in Montreal, a big conference in Montreal, but there's something happening in Ontario as well. The York Southwestern Tenants Union, they are holding an event that you have to register for. I should have shared the video. Bruno, you got to find Bruno's out there on York Southwestern. He's gathering folks for April 25th. So I'll probably remind you again next week, but it's many, many speakers, both the Friday night and then all day Saturday on April 26th. It's a workshop, panels, there's lunch. That's at Queen Street East in Toronto, pretty much right at Yonge Street. They're calling it the People's Assembly for Housing Justice. So I imagine you'll see representatives from various tenant organizations there, but it's open to people who have no affiliation and they just want to know how to do this, how to organize as tenants collectively. So if you're on our feed, it's all over our feed, which is Blueprints of Disruption. But like I said, I'll remind you folks next week, and maybe I'll still give you time to register, even though I believe it'll be pretty popular. The Montreal event sold out pretty quickly, and a lot of the panelists have already been on the show, so that was fun. But yeah, there's people trying to build up tenant capacity, and for me, I find that pretty exciting. Yeah, that was it in terms of my updates from the grassroots. I mean, it's just a sampling of it, really. Forever sharing different calls to action on our feed and victories. Court rulings are coming down next week. A lot of sentencing is happening, unfortunately. So we'll have updates for that next week as well. But yeah, I do like ending with the disruptive updates a little bit better because it's kind of ending on a high note, right? We spend the first half talking about how capital is screwing us over, but it's always nice to be reminded that there's, like, I don't know, countless people, and I'm just scratching the surface of the amount of people that are out there doing something about it. Anybody have
I saw that Sky that you had talked about, who was so she had a viral video, which was nice. It came across my TikTok page, so she got a little bit of traction, I think, for her cause, which is nice.
Yeah, so Sky Johnson,
yeah,
we will get her back on the show after her sentencing, and hopefully right after her sentencing, and she's not awarded any jail time. That has been a huge kind of punishment of process example of a young woman who taped a poster to the Starbucks window, faced mischief charges, was convicted, and has now been waiting months for the sentencing to happen as well. So for taping a piece of paper to a Starbucks window. And that viral video, I can tell you she's not lying at all. She is like one of the first people that was charged in North America for Palestine solidarity work. Toronto police have really worked hard to kind of set the bar very low in terms of their response to Palestinian solidarity. Like, I'm surprised she was convicted. To be honest, I didn't see that ending in a conviction, but quite often, like, that's not even the purpose, is to end up in a conviction. It's just to torment these people. But she has really made lemonade out of those lemons. And so, yeah, you can find her, Sky Johnson. It's SKIGH. Don't make the mistake. You'll never find her the other way. But yeah, if you do look up her name, she makes the comment there. It's like, if you look up her name on Google, it's horrific. Like, the Toronto Sun and all the worst players have done hit pieces on her very early on. And that's actually, that injustice is actually what spawned one of the most active Palestinian solidarity local groups, Eglinton and Lawrence, Don Valley. They saw that happen and just knew that they needed to do something in response, mobilize locally. And then that has just been a whirlwind of local groups popping up. So,
well, that video went pretty viral. I saw there was like some pretty big names like supporting her and stuff. Like Nemesis had posted on there and stuff. So hopefully she gets some good support out of it, which, what a terrible situation. I hope she sues them. Honestly, I hope that after, in a couple of years, once things have settled, that she is able to sue all of those publications who slandered her.
Yeah. And, miscarriage of justice, but, with the conviction, I don't know where she stands legally, but it's nice to see that they've not been able to silence her. She was one of the few that didn't really have those gag orders around her bail conditions, which were still bad. They still cost her big time. And she was doxxed and all of these awful things. But yeah, hopefully I'll be able to announce like an episode with her soon, because I like to give updates on some of the shit disturbers that we talk about. And that's been a long time. She's been dealing with this for a very long time now. I had to scroll very far back in the episodes to find that one and the discussion that we had with her. So, yeah, shout out to anybody kind of facing those processes right now. If you'd like to tell your story to us, we'd be happy to share it. Just make sure you check with your lawyer first. Yeah. So just so you know what you can say and what you can't say. that's a problem I have. Not a problem, but you know, I interview activists and organizers a lot, and one of the instructions I give them at the beginning and the end is like, if there's anything you shared with me that you think maybe you shouldn't have, let me know and I will take it out. But it's so fucked up that we have to overthink all of this so much. Joe's got a story to tell too, right? But it's like, how much can I share? What will help? Yeah. What will hurt? And that's just stuff we were never meant to navigate, but we sure are now. But thanks, folks, for coming out for another Friday. We'll do it again next week. Who knows who will join us then or what the hell we'll be talking about. The headlines are so ever shifting. And but I know we'll definitely have very good updates from the grassroots, as we always do. So that momentum builds as the iron fist tries to crush us. That is always the reaction, right? Is we adapt and we keep pushing forward. So have a good weekend. Hopefully it's not snowing where you are anymore. And may the snow melt and the flowers come up, and it will fully be spring when we check in next week. I feel it. I will have a pick of a tulip ready for you. But until then, make sure you keep disrupting.